Hello guys and welcome back to another video. In my last video I talked about how my AMD RX 9070 XT experience was anything but smooth on Linux. I had to send it back because I was not sure if the card had a hardware defect or if the Mesa drivers were not there yet. I would say that it was a hardware defect on the VRAM side of things because after a video encoding, after I rendered a video in KDN Live, the video was had all sorts of green stripes to it and stuff like that, and that sounds like a hardware defect, probably the VRAM. So I decided to go back to NVIDIA. No. Wait. Because if you don't know, my last GPU was an RTX 4070. And now I got my hands on an RTX 5070 Ti, the Zotac gaming variant to be specific. And in this video I want to talk about how my experience with the 5070 Ti went, and I can already tell you guys it was a lot smoother and a lot less franky in general than the 9070 XT by far. Next I wanted to compare the installation process from the 9070 XT to the 5070 Ti. With the 9070 XT I could not get the thing to work in Linux Mint, and I had to switch distributions multiple times because the Mesa drivers and the firmware for the 9070 XT was, and I think still is, not in the stable releases of distros like Linux Mint, Ubuntu, and basically all stable distros. And the only stable distro where the driver installation went somewhat good was Ubuntu and Pop OS. On the NVIDIA GPU side, I had to open the driver manager in Linux Mint, select a proprietary NVIDIA driver, click on install, then reboot, and it just worked. Nothing. No troubleshooting, no distro switching, no weird firmware installation processing and stuff like that. Which brings me to my next point. Now let's talk FPS. Most people say that you lose about 30% performance if you use NVIDIA on Linux instead of Windows. I did not notice a major performance drop, like I had about 10 FPS less than most benchmarks that were made on Windows 11. But to be fair, I had to compare my results on YouTube with benchmarks on YouTube because I didn't have Windows installed on my system. I only have Linux installed and I didn't want to go through the headache that is installing Windows 11. So that's that. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I had one problem: frame generation was not really working in Cyberpunk. As soon as I enabled frame gen, my HUD got all weird and stuff, but when I enabled frame gen 3 or 4 times, this stuff went away. But my latency was a lot higher, so I stuck with AMD's frame generation for now. But in other games like Doom the Dark Ages, multi-frame generation worked just fine, and I could even enable path tracing in both Doom the Dark Ages and Cyberpunk. With DLSS quality, I was getting a little bit over 40 to 50 FPS, which is a good baseline to enable frame generation on top of. So yeah, that went very smooth and almost no complaints there besides the frame generation stuff. So yeah, that went pretty well. Now we are basically at my conclusion about how good NVIDIA GPUs are on Linux, especially the 5070 Ti, which is still a pretty new GPU, and it came out at the start of this year. Overall, I'm very happy with the GPU and its performance, and I hope that the Linux support for NVIDIA GPUs will only get better looking forward. I also noticed one other problem. I had to use Wayland because I have 2 different monitors, and sometimes my display just flickers and a little bit of weird stuff happens, but that's not very often, and NVIDIA already stated that they're gonna improve their Wayland support going on in the future. So like I said, I don't know if my 9070 XT really had a hardware defect or driver problem or both at the same time. But for now I'm gonna stick around with NVIDIA, and maybe I will try next generation of AMD GPUs or the next 2 generations of AMD GPUs and see how they are gonna work in like stable distros and also rolling release distros. but right now I can absolutely recommend NVIDIA if you're on a stable distro like Mint or Debian, because the driver installing process is very, very easy, and your stuff, like I said, will just gonna work for the most part. But it can also be that the 9070 XT is very new, so if you're like using an older GPU like a 7900 XTX, your performance should also be very good, and the drivers should be default installed in the Linux kernel as also in the stable distros, because the 7900 XTX and like generally 7000 series and 6000 series should be in the kernel integrated in the stable distros. But newer AMD GPUs are just a lot more tinkery to get to work. Instead of NVIDIA GPUs, like I said, you just open the driver manager of your distro, install it, and reboot your PC, and it will just work. So yeah, if you haven't watched about the video that I talked about my problems with the 9070 XT, I have it linked up somewhere in the end card of the video, so that you can watch that and see how much I had to go through to get the card even to genuinely play games. And yeah, see you guys in the next video.